After my ex left me for his pregnant coworker, my daughter chose them over me. When they promised to pay for her college, I stopped child support. Then everything changed. I, 45F, divorced my ex-husband Robert, 47M, 3 years ago after 15 years of marriage. We have a daughter Samantha, 18F, who recently graduated high school. This whole situation started years ago but came to a head at Samantha's graduation party. Robert and I met when I was 21 and he was 23. I got pregnant with Samantha shortly after, and we decided to get married. The early years weren't easy. We were young with a baby, struggling to establish our careers and figure out adulthood at the same time. But we made it work. Robert took classes at night to become a project supervisor, and I worked my way up in an advertising firm. The first 10 years of our marriage were good. We bought a small house in a decent neighborhood, took Samantha to the park on weekends, had backyard barbecues with neighbors, and saved for yearly camping trips. We had arguments like any couple, but we always worked through them. When Samantha started school, I remember how proud we both were at her kindergarten graduation, standing together and taking pictures. Everything changed about 8 years ago. Robert got promoted to construction project manager, which meant more responsibility, higher pay, and longer hours. At first, I supported him completely. This was what he'd worked for since we got married. The extra money would help with Samantha's future college expenses. Within months, Robert started coming home later and later. He'd leave before dawn and return after Samantha was in bed. Weekends weren't family time anymore. He was always catching up on paperwork or taking calls. When he was home, he barely talked, and when we did talk, he'd snap over small things like dishes in the sink or laundry not being folded his way. I tried talking to him several times. I suggested date nights, family outings, even marriage counseling. Each time, Robert brushed me off, saying it was just work stress and I needed to be more understanding. I believed him because I wanted to. The truth came out when Samantha turned 14. I planned her birthday celebration for weeks, dinner at her favorite Italian restaurant where the servers sang and brought a special dessert. Robert promised he'd meet us there directly from work. Samantha and I waited for over an hour. I called his phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail each time. After the 5th call, I gave up. Samantha pretended she wasn't disappointed, but I saw how she kept checking the door whenever someone walked in. We drove home in silence. When we pulled into the driveway, Robert's truck was there. Inside, we found him stuffing clothes into a suitcase, looking panicked when he saw us. The words tumbled out of him. He'd been having an affair with his coworker Jessica for the past year. She was pregnant, and he was leaving me for her. Samantha ran to her room crying. I stood frozen in the hallway as Robert grabbed his suitcase and walked out. He moved in with Jessica that night. The divorce was messy. What made it worse was the custody battle. I fought for primary custody, not wanting Samantha to spend time in the house where Jessica lived. But during one hearing, Samantha asked to speak privately with the judge. When they returned, the judge announced that Samantha had expressed a desire to live primarily with Robert and Jessica. When I asked Samantha why later that day, she simply said she felt more comfortable at their house. They had a bigger house in a better school district, and Jessica treated her like a friend rather than a kid. Those words stung more than anything Robert had done. Despite my objections, the court granted Robert primary custody with visitation for me every other weekend and some holidays. My world turned upside down completely. The first year after the divorce was awful. During her visits, Samantha became increasingly distant. She'd often cut our weekends short, saying she had plans with friends or needed to get back for something with Robert and Jessica. She'd spend hours on her phone texting when she was with me. I tried arranging activities I thought she'd enjoy, movies, shopping trips, cooking her favorite meals, but nothing seemed to interest her. Then came the day I overheard her on the phone. I walked past her room and heard her say, "Mom says I can't go to the concert next weekend." For a second, I thought she meant me, until I realized she was talking about Jessica. I stopped and asked her about it after she hung up. She just shrugged and said Jessica was more like a mom now because she was around more often. I walked away without responding. Over the next 3 years, our relationship never improved. Samantha visited less and less frequently, often canceling at the last minute. When she did visit, she spent most of the time texting friends or talking about her life with Robert and Jessica, their vacations, the gifts they bought her, how Jessica helped with her makeup and clothes. Meanwhile, I continued paying the court-ordered child support every month without fail. I also put aside extra money for Samantha's college fund, believing education was important regardless of our personal relationship. I never mentioned these savings to Samantha or Robert. I didn't want them to think I was trying to buy her affection. 2 weeks before her high school graduation, Samantha called me unexpectedly. She invited me to her graduation ceremony and the celebration party afterward at Robert and Jessica's house. I asked if Robert and Jessica would be at both, and she confirmed they would. The thought of sitting through the ceremony watching them celebrate together made my stomach turn. The idea of going to their house, surrounded by their friends and family, seemed even worse. I told Samantha I appreciated the invitation but didn't think I could attend. I suggested an alternative celebration, just the two of us, maybe lunch the following weekend. Samantha immediately got upset. She accused me of being selfish and punishing her for her past choices. According to her, she was trying to include me, and my refusal showed I didn't care about her or her achievements. I tried explaining that this wasn't about punishment but about protecting myself. Samantha cut me off, saying that if I really loved her, I would put aside my feelings. She claimed I was the one who pushed her away, not the other way around, and hung up. Within hours, my phone exploded with messages from Robert, Jessica, and even some of Samantha's friends. They all said the same thing: I was being selfish and cruel, putting my feelings ahead of Samantha's needs and ruining what should be a happy time for her. Part of me felt guilty. I knew graduation was important, and I hated disappointing Samantha. But another part felt angry. Where was this concern for my feelings when Samantha moved out? When she started calling Jessica mom? When she consistently prioritized her new family over me for the past 3 years? I didn't want to create more drama, but I also didn't want to force myself to play happy families and pretend the past hadn't happened. I was afraid I might break down emotionally if I attended. Now I'm torn between forcing myself to go for Samantha's sake or protecting myself from what will inevitably be a painful experience. Ida? Update 1: After much internal debate and the flood of messages accusing me of selfishness, I decided to attend Samantha's graduation ceremony. I couldn't bear missing such an important milestone in her life, despite our strained relationship. On graduation day, I arrived at the school auditorium early and found a seat near the back corner. I hoped to avoid running into Robert and Jessica before the ceremony. As the auditorium filled with excited families, I kept my eyes fixed on the program, studying the list of graduates and scholarships. When Samantha walked across the stage to receive her diploma, I felt a mixture of pride seeing how grown-up she looked in her cap and gown, and sadness knowing I had missed so much of her high school experience. I took several photos on my phone, even though I doubted she'd want them. After the ceremony, I hesitated but ultimately drove to Robert and Jessica's house for the party. Their 2-story suburban home was packed with people I didn't recognize. The moment I stepped through the door, I felt like an outsider. Samantha gave me a quick, awkward hug before being pulled away by a group of friends. Robert and Jessica nodded at me from across the room but kept their distance. The tension was palpable. I wandered around, looking at the photos displayed on tables and walls. Years of Samantha's life captured in frames, vacations, sports events, holidays, most taken after she moved in with them. There were almost no pictures of me or of Samantha's life before the divorce. For an hour, I stood on the periphery watching Samantha laugh and joke with her friends, Robert and Jessica. They looked like the perfect family. I was about to slip out quietly when I overheard Samantha talking to a friend near the food table. She was excitedly discussing her college plans, mentioning that Robert and Jessica were paying for her to attend an expensive private university out of state. She quoted them saying they wanted her to have the best education possible regardless of cost. The words hit me like a truck. For years, I had faithfully paid child support and secretly put away extra money for Samantha's education. Every month, I deposited money into a savings account, sometimes skipping things I needed to ensure the balance grew. And now, not only had Samantha not consulted me about her college choice, but she was proudly telling everyone that Robert and Jessica were funding her education, as if I had contributed nothing. I asked Samantha to speak with me privately on the back porch. Once alone, I explained how I had been paying child support and saving extra for her education for years, despite how she had treated me. Then I told her that since Robert and Jessica were covering her university expenses, I would no longer be paying child support or contributing to her education fund. I explained that my financial support had been taken for granted, just like my role as her mother. Actions have consequences, and she couldn't expect me to continue financially supporting her after pushing me away emotionally for years. Samantha's face went pale. She asked if I was serious, and I confirmed I was. Within minutes, Robert and Jessica came outside demanding to know what was happening. When Samantha told them, they became furious. Robert called me spiteful and selfish, while Jessica accused me of trying to ruin Samantha's future out of jealousy. I calmly repeated my reasoning. I had supported Samantha financially despite being treated as an outsider for years. I wasn't legally obligated to pay for her college, especially when my role as her mother had been dismissed and replaced. The party atmosphere evaporated after our confrontation. Guests started leaving, giving me disapproving looks as they passed. Samantha was in tears, saying I had ruined her graduation day. Robert, red-faced with anger, told me to leave. Jessica stood with her arm around Samantha, glaring at me. As I drove home, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me felt bad for causing a scene at what should have been a celebration. But another part felt relieved, even liberated. For years, I had silently endured the pain of rejection while continuing to support Samantha financially. For once, I had stood up for myself. In the days following the party, I received no calls or messages from Samantha, Robert, or Jessica. The silence was new territory. I focused on my own life, telling myself I had done the right thing by being honest about my feelings and decisions. Years of being taken for granted, treated more like an ATM than a mother, had finally reached a breaking point. I still wasn't sure what this meant for my relationship with Samantha going forward. Part of me hoped it might serve as a wake-up call, helping her understand how her actions had affected me. Another part worried it might be the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. Either way, I committed to focusing on myself. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected during the divorce, signed up for painting classes I had always wanted to try, and joined a local hiking group. For the first time in years, I started building a life that wasn't centered around my broken family. I wonder if I handled the situation wrong. Should I have chosen a different time or place for this conversation? Should I have kept paying despite everything? Was I wrong to stand my ground? Update 2: A few weeks after the graduation party incident, I received an unexpected call from Samantha. When I saw her name on my phone screen, I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Samantha was crying when I answered. Through her tears, she explained that she had just had a shocking conversation with Robert and Jessica about her college funding. Despite their previous promises, they had informed her they could no longer afford to fully fund her expensive private university. Jessica had lost her job due to major company layoffs, and their household income had been significantly reduced. They suggested Samantha consider a less expensive state school or take out student loans. Samantha was devastated, having already committed to the private university and paid the enrollment deposit. She couldn't bear the thought of changing her plans now. As I listened to her cry, I experienced a complex mix of reactions. On one hand, there was a grim satisfaction in seeing that Robert and Jessica's grand promises weren't as solid as they had claimed. On the other hand, I remembered all too well how it felt to have the rug pulled out from under you by people you trusted. Then Samantha surprised me. She said she now understood why I was hurt at the party. Hearing Robert and Jessica talk about funding everything must have stung, especially given the child support and college savings I had quietly maintained over the years. She apologized for taking me for granted and for how she had treated me over the years. She admitted it had been unfair and that she had allowed Robert and Jessica to influence her feelings toward me. She wanted to make things right between us. I listened quietly to her apology. When she finished, I told her I appreciated her words, but they didn't erase years of hurt. Rebuilding trust would take time, and a single apology, while welcome, wasn't enough to undo everything. Then she asked if I would reconsider withdrawing my financial support. She said she now realized how much she had been counting on my help and was scared about how she would manage college costs. I took a deep breath before responding. I explained that I couldn't pretend the past hadn't happened. I loved her, but I needed to protect myself both emotionally and financially. I suggested she look into scholarships, consider getting a part-time job, or think about Robert and Jessica's suggestion of a less expensive school. Samantha's tone changed from apologetic to frustrated. She said I was being unforgiving and that a real mother would help no matter what. I stood my ground again. I pointed out that I had been a real mother all along. It was Samantha who had pushed me away and replaced me with Jessica. The conversation ended with me telling Samantha I was open to working on our relationship if she was genuine, but it would take time and effort from both of us. I also made it clear that this wouldn't change my decision regarding her educational expenses. In the following days, I received several angry messages from Robert and Jessica, accusing me of vindictiveness and using Samantha's education as a weapon. I ignored these messages, knowing they would twist whatever I said. To my surprise, Samantha continued to reach out. Our conversations were awkward at first but gradually became more open. She shared her struggles with rearranging her college plans and her disappointment in Robert and Jessica. I mostly listened without offering solutions, allowing her to work through her feelings independently. Over time, I noticed positive changes in Samantha. She became more independent, actively looking into scholarships and part-time jobs. She even mentioned considering community college for her first 2 years to save money. Privately, I felt proud of her taking initiative. Samantha also started sharing more about her life with Robert and Jessica. She admitted things weren't as perfect as they seemed. She often felt caught in the middle of their arguments, and Jessica could be controlling and manipulative. The idealized image of her life with them was beginning to crack. Meanwhile, I continued focusing on building my own life. The painting classes turned out to be therapeutic, and I made several friends in the hiking group. I was rediscovering my identity outside of being a mother and ex-wife. Our relationship slowly rebuilt itself, though it wasn't the same and likely never would be. Too much hurt had occurred on both sides. But we were finding a new dynamic based on honesty and mutual respect. I remained firm on not financially supporting her education. I believed it was important for Samantha to learn independence and the consequences of her choices. However, I did offer non-financial help, such as researching scholarships with her and advising on budgeting. Looking back on the graduation confrontation, I still believe I made the right choice. It was painful and difficult, but necessary for my well-being and, ironically, for the potential of a healthier future relationship with Samantha. I learned it's possible to love someone while maintaining boundaries and prioritizing self-care. Robert and Jessica stopped trying to guilt me about finances. According to Samantha, they were struggling, Jessica was still unemployed, and the financial strain was causing tension in their relationship. I took no pleasure in their difficulties but felt no responsibility for them either. Samantha eventually decided to attend a state university close to home. She took out student loans and found a part-time job at a cafe near campus. While it wasn't the prestigious private university she had dreamed of, she seemed to be embracing the challenge. Despite our still fragile relationship, I felt proud of her taking responsibility. The future remains uncertain. I hope Samantha continues to mature and our relationship continues to improve. But I no longer pin my happiness on that outcome. I've learned to find fulfillment elsewhere. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and almost a year since the graduation party confrontation that changed everything. Samantha completed her first semester at the state university, and I've continued building my own life. Many unexpected developments occurred that I want to share. Samantha thrived at the state university beyond all expectations. The school had an excellent program in her chosen field, something neither of us had realized when she was set on the expensive private university. She maintained a 3.8 GPA while working part-time and received a merit scholarship for her second semester based on her first semester performance. One evening in November, Samantha called and asked if she could come for dinner. During the meal, she brought up Jessica again, but in a different context. She explained that living away from Robert and Jessica gave her perspective. She realized Jessica had deliberately tried to replace me, making subtle comments about my parenting and encouraging Samantha to view me negatively. Samantha discovered that Jessica had intercepted birthday cards and small gifts I sent during those years, telling Samantha I hadn't bothered. She found a box in their attic with unopened envelopes addressed to her in my handwriting. When confronted, Jessica claimed she was protecting Samantha from my inconsistent attempts at communication. This revelation created a major rift between Samantha and Jessica. Robert initially defended Jessica but eventually admitted he suspected what was happening and did nothing to stop it. He apologized to Samantha but made excuses about wanting to keep the peace at home. Samantha moved out of their house completely, taking a small apartment near campus with a roommate. She limited contact with both Robert and Jessica, seeing them only occasionally for brief visits. Our relationship continued improving gradually. We established a routine of Sunday morning coffee together every other week. These meetings were sometimes still awkward but increasingly comfortable. We stayed away from heavy topics, focusing instead on her classes, my new painting hobby, and neutral subjects like books and movies. In January, Robert lost his job due to company restructuring. Combined with Jessica's continued unemployment, their financial situation deteriorated rapidly. They had to sell their house and move to a small apartment. Robert contacted me, asking if I would reconsider helping with Samantha's education expenses since they could no longer contribute anything. I declined firmly but without malice. I reminded him that Samantha was managing well on her own through scholarships, loans, and her part-time job. His financial problems were not my responsibility. 2 weeks ago, Samantha asked if we could talk seriously. She said the past year had taught her more about adult life than her entire childhood. She apologized again for her behavior during the years she lived with Robert and Jessica, acknowledging how hurtful it must have been for me. She didn't ask for money. Instead, she asked if I would help her figure out how to become fully independent. She wanted advice on building credit, finding a better apartment, and managing her student loans effectively. For the first time in years, she was approaching me as a parent rather than an ATM or obligation. I agreed to help with advice but maintained my boundary regarding financial support. Samantha accepted this without argument, saying she respected my decision and understood why I made it. Last weekend, we spent an entire day together shopping for furniture for her new apartment and having lunch. The conversation flowed naturally. She mentioned wanting to introduce me to her new boyfriend next month, something that would have seemed impossible a year ago. As for me, I recently received a promotion at work. The hiking group introduced me to new friends, including a widower, 51M, with whom I've gone on several casual dates. Whether that develops into something serious remains to be seen, but it's nice to have someone to go to dinner with occasionally. I maintained no contact with Jessica and minimized communication with Robert, limiting our interactions to necessary discussions about Samantha. This boundary protected my mental health and prevented old wounds from reopening. Looking back at the past year, I'm amazed at how much changed because I finally stood up for myself at that graduation party. By refusing to continue being taken for granted, I forced everyone, including myself, to reevaluate our relationships and responsibilities. Samantha had to learn independence the hard way, but that lesson proved more valuable than an expensive private university education. She's becoming a responsible, thoughtful adult who understands that actions have consequences. Robert and Jessica face the reality that promises require follow-through, and that manipulating a child against her parent eventually backfires. Their perfect family image collapsed under financial pressure and exposed truths. And I discovered that protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. Setting boundaries didn't destroy my relationship with Samantha as I feared. Instead, it created the foundation for a healthier connection based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. The road ahead will surely have bumps. Our family isn't magically healed, and years of hurt don't disappear overnight. But for the first time in a long time, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future, both mine and Samantha's.